Section 7 of Alcatraz of the Starways by Henry Hasse and Albert DePina. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Cinda J. M. Section 7. Under the dim illumination maintained even as far as these outlying caves, the group went grimly on. Their passage through the tortuous corridors was dotted by discarded vacuum suits, but no echoes drifted back to them from the activity of the base. Twice they lost their way, ending up against blank rock walls and retracing their steps, but at last the interconnecting tunnel chain became familiar to the commander. "She blames Luhor for the oxygen business," Mark murmured to Karsten walking beside him. "Should," Karsten exclaimed laconically, grimly. "Aladian warned us against Luhor, remember? There'll be hell to pay when we get back. Any monkey wrench thrown into the machinery of their plans helps the Earth. I hope—" He broke off, staring moodily ahead. "She's far more human than you think," Mark Denning said softly. "Yes, I noticed that today." Karsten's voice sounded glad. "It's only the Spartan training she learned while cruising the space lanes with her piratical father that keeps her up. That, and the old man's insane will driving her on through a sense of loyalty to him." They were so near to the base now that Mark expected momentarily to hear the clang of metal in the factories, the voices of workmen. His heart quickened at the thought of seeing Aladian, and he forgot his weariness in embroidering upon that thought. But the ominous stillness remained unbroken. They entered the final corridor leading to the vast central chamber. The commander ran forward with the anxious men close behind her. They entered the grotto. The subterranean base extended into the distance before their startled, unbelieving eyes. "What?" Cynthia began bewilderedly. It was a dead city, soundless and inert. Under the distant cavern roof, it had the air of a ghost town drained of all life. Mark's heart leapt into his mouth. "Aladian!" he cried involuntarily, and his hands clenched in an agony of anxiety, of helpless rage. Commander Cynthia was already running toward the palace, a deathly fear mirrored in her eyes. The men had stopped uncertainly, too weary and exhausted to understand. Then, driven by a single thought, they staggered off to their building in search of water and food. Scarcely had the echoes of Mark's cry stopped reverberating when from the shadows of a traverse corridor emerged the elfin figure of the Venusian. Aladian gazed at Mark as if he had returned from the dead. She closed her eyes, swayed a little. Mark caught her in his arms. He too was silent. No words would serve. "To the palace!" she finally breathed, gently disengaging herself. Followed by Karsten, they hurried to the imposing building where old George Marnock reigned. Aladian led them swiftly through the paneled outer hall, through the magnificent salon, where the loot from many years was a fabulous welter of wealth. Mark had no eyes for it now. They did not stop until they reached the inner chambers and finally came to George Marnock's room, where no one but Cynthia was ever permitted. Lying grotesquely twisted on the priceless Martian tapestry that covered the bed, the ancient pirate was dead. Cynthia Marnock was kneeling beside him, weeping softly. There was no doubt as to the manner of his death. The pencil-thin opening through his temple could only have been done by an atom blast. "Luhor," Aladian said, indicating the wound with a gesture. They withdrew, leaving Cynthia alone with her grief. The two men followed the Venusian girl to the immense palace dining room. With her own hand she served them food and drink, asking no questions, uttering no words until their vast hunger and thirst were appeased. Then she sat down. "And so," she began without preamble, "the unpredictable has entered." At their rush of questions she held up a hand. "Let me explain," she begged. "I can do it briefly if you were silent. After you left, Luhor ordered every man here to go aboard the spacer. He blasted down 2 or 3 who refused. You will find them in the airlock. Previous to that, I heard him arguing with George Marnock. He atom blasted Marnock from behind. I know, because I deliberately contacted his mind, although the effort nearly drove me mad. It is not easy for us to tune to an alien intellect, but Luhor, being partially Venusian, helped." The miracle is he didn't take you with him, Karsten ventured. You were too valuable to leave behind. When we came here yesterday, she said simply, I studied the plans of these caverns. When I learned what was in Luthor's mind, I hid in a maze of abandoned corridors. They searched for me a while, but since he plans to return, he gave up the search for the present. He had no time to waste. The patrol has been to the prison swamp. Failing to find either of you, and learning of my disappearance, Earth has mobilized its fleet. How do you know this? Both men leaned tensely forward. Through the Athromagnom, George Marnik has in his laboratory here the most powerful receiving and transmission instrument I have ever seen, greater even than the Athromagnom we have on Venus. So that's how he always kept a step ahead of the patrol, Karsten mused. The scientists he used to kidnap from space liners. He must have forced them to perfect scientific inventions here. Yes, the Venusian girl nodded, but I haven't told you the most important part. Luthor's plan. If he succeeds, there will be no peace. He has taken the men to the asteroid where Marnik's new fleet of space vessels are to be assembled. But worse than that, they are also to fit gigantic rockets to the asteroid itself. It is very dense and greatly pitted, which simplifies things. With the rockets of this new metal, he can guide the asteroid's course. It will be the terror of space, literally invulnerable, with banks of immense electrocannon and atom blasts, and cradling a swarm of the new spacers. Ernest Karsten could only hold his head in his hands. Earth's greatest enemy had died in Marnik, but a greater, more ruthless one had arisen in Luthor. Go on, Aladian, please. Mark's tones were reassuring. Luthor does not suspect that I contacted his mind. He believes all of you have died in the wastes. I got that from his mind, too. Since he will return, because Vulcan is to be the seat of his empire, and he wants me, we have time to plan how we are going to receive him. He's persuaded that the only living being on Vulcan now is a defenseless girl. She smiled enigmatically. But that asteroid! That hellish threat to Earth! Karsten was beside himself. And to Venus and Mars, Aladian reminded him gently. It will take months for those rockets to be installed, Earthman. He will be here long before that, I am certain of it, as only a woman can be certain. She raised her eyes and gazed at the doorway. Framed at the entrance to the dining room, Cynthia Marnik stood looking somberly and dry-eyed. Aladian rose swiftly and went over to her. My dear, the Venusian said softly, a world of compassion in her voice. Cynthia smiled wanly, took the tumbler of water that Karsten extended to her. She drank dazedly and then sat down with the inexpressible weariness of one whose world has come tumbling down about her head. Aladian darted to the kitchen and upon returning made the Earth girl drink a cup of concentrate, then led her away to her bedroom. You must sleep, Aladian was saying softly, monotonously, with a hypnotic cadence in her voice. I wonder if it will be safe to arm the men, Karsten questioned thoughtfully, his mind grappling with the problem. That's a chance we'll have to take, Mark Denning replied. A few among them are not really hardened criminals, but are politicals, as you know. I think they will all fight for us, provided we can offer them freedom when and if we win. I can make them no promises not sanctioned by the Earth Council, Karsten said stiffly. Remember, their lives are forfeit. And so will ours be if you don't snap out of that single-track rut in which you've grooved your brain, Mark exclaimed acidly. Council or no council, the Earth, Venus, Mars, and the colonies must be saved. This is no time to quibble about ethics. A hell of a lot will be left of your council if we don't stop Luthor. You startle me sometimes, Mark Denning. You do not sound as a true servant of the Earth state. Because to you, Mark said slowly, the state is the few decrepit members calling themselves the council and the top-heavy government of Earth. But to me, the state are the millions and billions of human beings whose destinies are ruled by a self-appointed few and who are now facing even a worse slavery if we don't succeed in being what Aladian calls the unpredictable. Carson's face flushed with anger. He drew himself to his full height as he said, "I represent the government of Earth, which rules the planets, and I am your superior officer." "You're wrong," Mark Denning countered, rising too. "I am a free agent as of this moment and recognize no superior. I'll not be hamstrung by rules and regulations which can't serve us now, Karsten." "No need to quarrel." Aladian spoke placidly from the doorway where, unnoticed, she had been listening. "Because only I and Cynthia can make terms with Earth, if we survive." "You and Commander Cynthia?" Carson exclaimed. "Both of your lives have been forfeit. I doubt if the council will be willing to listen to any terms coming from you." Mark Denning's face was stained by a dull flush, and he took a step forward, but Aladian laid her hand lightly on his arm and stopped him. "The colonel belongs to the old order," she said very softly. "It is difficult for him to adjust himself to a changing universe, but this time it is beyond his control." "Why?" Karsten uttered the word grimly. "Because through the Ethero-Magnum I have already warned Venus and Mars. My planet is being mobilized. Mars will soon take the necessary steps. But the most important reason of all is that Earth has no means of landing a fleet on Vulcan, does not know the location of Luhor's asteroid, and does not even suspect the existence of the new allotropic metal." Karsten looked baffled as the Venusian girl spoke, then turned to Mark Denning with the expression of a man who for once felt hopelessly lost. "I can promise the men who aid us a fortune to each," Aladian continued, "and the leisure to spend it on Venus. As for the Earth," she said thoughtfully, "only Commander Cynthia and I know the formula for the new metal and the location of the asteroid." "I will talk to the men," Mark said with a finality that left no doubt. "Let them rest for a few hours, then I'll see to it that they're on our side. I know how to rouse them. Wait until they learn that Luhor shortchanged them on oxygen. How much backing can you expect from Venus, Aladian?" "To the last man," she said quietly. "They have already seen me through the Ethero-Magnum and heard my story. I intercepted the triplanetary beam as the Earth broadcast and transmitted our beam along their channel. By the time Earth's government set out their interceptor to neutralize my beam, it was already too late. The 3 planets are seething." "And Luhor? Wouldn't he have picked up on your beam on the spacer and heard you?" Aladian shrugged. "He knows I'm here. The confusion created by my broadcast only served to aid his plans for the moment. He has nothing to fear as far as he knows. A war between the planets would only make his conquest simpler." "And knowing that," Karsten spoke bitterly, "you still broadcast your story and let your image be seen? Do you suppose Venus will ever be content now with anything short of war?" "Yes, I do. We are intelligent beings, not Martian atavisms, nor do we have your Earth's insane will to power. We only want peace, and with it freedom. But the game is ruthless, Karsten. The universe is the stake." Aladian turned to leave. "Mark," she said gently from the doorway, "Cynthia can show you where the arsenal is located. You'll find every imaginable weapon. Also, you'd better study the combination that opens the airlocks and the synchronized degravitators. I suspect that Luhor will be back here soon. Very soon." Suddenly, the terrific reaction of that day hit Mark with a sickening impact. He was hardly able to rise to his feet. Karsten was slumped over the table. Mark went over and shook him gently and somehow aided the older man to his feet. Together they went into the fabulously furnished salon and, unable to go any further, threw themselves on couches piled with priceless rugs and embroidered scarves from the various planets. Karsten instantly was asleep. Despite his utter weariness, Mark slept fitfully, awakening and then dropping back to sleep as the hours passed in their eternal caravan. Something clamored at the back of his brain. Something he had forgotten because of the major crisis they'd had to confront on their return to the base. And suddenly he sat upright, The overhead lights had automatically dimmed. No one was stirring. With a shock, Mark had remembered Volk and the man they had left to watch him. He leapt to his feet, aching in every bone, and ran to the building where the men were quartered. If Volk gets tired of waiting and wriggles out through that hole, he tried not to think of the rest. He burst into the building and roused the men. Up! On your feet! There's no time to waste! His terrible urgency instilled them with a nameless fear, prodding them as nothing else would have done. Your lives are at stake, he told them bluntly, and reminded them of Volk. At any moment, he might decide he's waited long enough. Who among you knows how to repair that breach? 3 of the men came forward. All right, Mark told them. Hurry to the shops and get what instruments and materials you need. But hurry! The men could not return to sleep now, knowing that at any moment the base's life-giving air might go rushing away. This emergency, following so close upon the other hardships of the day, seemed too much. Mark saw that they were all very near the breaking point. Now was a psychological moment to speak to them, and by giving them the entire picture, lift them above the present crisis, as well as inspire them with hope for the future. Calmly, he told of Luhor's treachery in giving them a short oxygen supply, with the intention of murdering them all. Deliberately, with calculated phrases, he aroused their hatred and thirst for revenge. Mark paused, letting it sink in, giving time for their dark passions to reach a peak. Then he told of Luhor's asteroid and the threat to the planets. He dangled before their eyes the promise of untold wealth and freedom on Venus for the rest of their lives. To give his promises authority and weight, he made no bones about the fact that he was a high operative of the Triplanetary Bureau of Prisons, but he climaxed it with the guarantee of a blanket pardon from the Earth Council itself. You will see and hear the council on the Magnum, but we shall be making the terms, Mark Jennings said forcefully. There's no trick in this. You have everything to gain and nothing to lose. In the swamp, your lives were forfeit. They were forfeit here on Vulcan, too. I promise you wealth on Venus, and the freedom you'll never have any other way. Who's with me? He need not have asked, for the clamor that answered him was affirmative and unanimous. Gone for the moment was their fatigue as they embroidered upon the possibilities of the days to come. Not until the trio returned from repairing the breach, bringing Volk with them, did the men return to their sleep with the first and only hope they had had in years. Only Mark Denning realized the trials to come. These few men had been won over easily. Not so easy would be the negotiated terms with Earth. The Earth government had won its dominance over the system the hard way, only after a bitter 10 years interplanetary war, and it would not easily relinquish its position. End of section 7.